Hey, friends, welcome to another episode of Not Your Mama's Podcast. The title of this episode is The Ultimate Career Toolkit. In this episode, we are speaking with Mark Herschberg, who is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. Educated at MIT, Mark has spent his career launching and fixing new ventures at startups, Fortune 500s, and academia. His development new software languages, online marketplaces, new authentication systems, and tracked criminals and terrorists on the dark web. Mark helped create the Underground Practice Opportunity Programs, MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he's taught for 20 years. Mark also serves on the boards of the nonprofit Techie Youth and Plant a Million Corals. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. It's such an honor. You have such an amazing background. I love everything that you've done. And your book, The Career Toolkit. Why did you write this book? And explain a little bit about your background.
20 years ago, what we found in research by MIT is that companies want these skills: leadership, communication, team building, networking, negotiating, but no one's teaching them. And this is a huge skills gap. This is not unique to MIT or engineers. It's not unique to college students. This is universal across all roles, all experience levels. And unfortunately, the university system is not addressing it. So at MIT, we created a program, the Career Success Accelerator, to help instill it in our students. But as I said, it's not just our students who need this. And so I want to get the skills out to a larger set of people.
Why do you think that the school system doesn't teach us these things?
There are historical reasons, and in brief, high schools were set up to be somewhat backwards looking. High schools are a modern invention that were really created as we left the farm and went into the industrialized workforce. You didn't need a lot of networking skills to work on the assembly factory floor. And so we haven't really thought we need to incorporate these. At the college level, the university system is focused around giving you very narrow domain skills. When you think about majoring in marketing or accounting, you're taking a bunch of classes in that discipline to give you the technical knowledge. And yes, that's important, but the professors who are the experts are experts in that knowledge and focus on that knowledge, and no one's stepping back and saying, but what do you need to be successful? So it's also a little backwards thinking. I think that will start to change, but it's going to take 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, it's usually a generational thing in order to see change. So, how should women think about incorporating their family into a career plan? And what does a career plan actually look like?
It's funny, we're good at project planning. If your CEO came to you and said, here is a big project and you're in charge, you've got 2 years to get it done, you'd say, okay, well, I can't just cross my fingers and hope to make it. We have to create a plan, a project plan, a timeline, a budget. We're going to have check-ins. We're going to see if we're on plan, off plan. And yet when it comes to a much bigger project, your career, you say, well, I hope I'm a VP in 10 years. It's got to cross my fingers and see if I get there. There's no planning. There's no timeline. And that's insane. So you want to create a plan, not unlike the plans we create for our projects. Now, what trips people up is they say, well, how do I know what I'm doing in 7 years? You don't. But how do you know what you're doing on day 534 of this 2-year project? You don't. It's not about having every little detail. It's about having a general plan and checking back on it. But now here's the key. Most people focus on their career and then they try to fit their family and lifestyle around it. Really, you need to generate a career that fits into your life. So when it comes to creating a career plan, don't just ask questions like, what type of job do I want to do? Ask questions like, do I want to have flexibility? Do I want to be able to take off in the middle of the afternoon if I want to watch my kids' Little League game? If that's important to you, find a career that lets you do that. So focus on creating your life and then finding a career path that fits into the life that you want.
I think that's a great perspective because we kind of get muddled in the thought of like career, and, sometimes the family can be pushed aside. And I think it's important to work around the family dynamics when it comes to your career. you only get that one chance, that one opportunity. They're never going to be young again. They're just only going to get older. So you need to be able to cherish those moments and think of ways that you can still participate them and then go after your goals and your dreams. I think that's a great reminder for everyone listening here on the podcast today.
You should enjoy your career, but your career is one aspect of your life, and think about optimizing your life.
Yeah. So how should men think about incorporating well, I guess it's the same thing. Men and women should incorporate the same thing. They should, think about what they want in their career and incorporate it around their family dynamic. Is there a difference between the genders, do you think, or is it pretty much the same?
I would certainly say to men, it is the same how you think about it, but men, we need to give them that little nudge to think about it. Because women, from the time they're probably in junior high or high school, hear about things like you're going to potentially have maternity leave, you might take time off to raise kids. We don't mention that to men. At no point did someone say, by the way, you're going to have kids and you might need to take time off to help your wife out, or you're going to have increased responsibilities at home. No one explicitly said that to me. It was obvious. I managed to pick it up, but we do that to women and not men. So let's be more explicit. Men, we need to be partners to our spouses. We need to participate in the child rearing. Now, maybe you all agree it's 50-50. Maybe you have a different arrangement, and that's your decision, but be explicit in knowing what your responsibilities are and planning for that as you plan your life, and then plan a career that fits into your life and your obligations.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think men sometimes get more focused on the career, and they always say like a man doesn't become a father until he sees his child versus like a mother becomes a mother right when she's pregnant. So there is a totally different like genetic makeup between men and women that differentiate. And so does networking differ by gender when women are networking versus men are networking when it comes to negotiating for your career or what it looks like?
Well, networking and negotiating, those are two topics.
Yeah.
Networking, on the one hand, it's the same for everyone. It's relationship building, although there are certain stylistic differences. And if you think about how men become friends, how men build relationships versus how women do it, there are some subtle differences, and we can incorporate that into our networking. But of course, I'm speaking in generalities. Men tend to do things one way, women another, but that's not true for all of us. And so what's more important is to focus on your own style of how you like to engage with people, whether it's you like to go into those big crowded events and meet a lot of people initially, or you prefer engaging with people more one-on-one. Do you prefer, when you meet a few people, bringing a few folks together and meeting in small groups to build that relationship? So there's different ways to do it. Women more commonly, and again, this is a stereotype and it is not true for everyone, women are more likely to speak on the phone than men. This might be different with some of the younger generation where I think no one wants to do it. Using phone calls to develop that relationship to, hey, we haven't talked in a while, let's catch up. Because networking isn't about getting the business card, it's about building the relationship.
Yeah.
Some people may prefer more phone calls, other more an email or a text message. Men, for example, it's not uncommon that we don't talk to each other for 3 years, and then we see each other and it's like time was paused and it came back. And that's totally normal. And other people say, you haven't spoken for years. And so it's recognizing these different styles correlated to gender, but not assigned or prescribed to them, and just working in a networking style that works for you. When it comes to negotiating, now this one's tricky. There was an Australian study that found there was no difference in how men and women negotiated. That's what the data says. My anecdotal experience says there is a slight difference in US men and women. And here is one of my theories. Now, I do not have formal data to back this up, so you can disagree, you can take it with a grain of salt. One of the hardest things to do when negotiating is to take that chance. And this is where we've seen, men will walk in and say, oh, totally underqualified, but I want that job. Whereas women have that, well, I meet 9 out of the 10 requirements. I'm not sure if I should apply. Again, we're generalizing. That's not true for everyone. We see a similar pattern when negotiating. And I honestly think this comes from our heterosexual dating norms. Because as a man, from the time I was a teenager, I was taught, walk up to that woman and say, "Hi, I think you're cute. I'd like your number." And she says no. And believe me, it is painful. And I have had that dagger shoved into me more times than I can count. But as a guy, I was trained, go through it, ask for something, go approach that girl who seems like she's out of your league and try and get rejected and try again. And that's taught us to reach for the brass ring. It's taught us to take chances. It's taught us to face rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many women don't have that experience growing up of rejection. There are some other standard practices among men and women. Men, of course, we put each other down. That's one of our styles of bonding. So we're used to, okay, you're insulting me and I'm going to insult you. Women stylistically don't do that. So men are a lot more used to rejection. So I think that's why it's easier for men generally to go and reach higher, to put that bigger proposal on the table than for women. And one of the things women need to get more comfortable with, again, in general, not every one of them, is to take that larger reach, is to put the bolder proposal out first, knowing it will probably be rejected, and that's okay. Because getting a yes on your first proposal means you probably didn't go far enough.
Yeah, I remember hearing when I was younger, like, starting to date or whatever, men take rejection differently than women. And I think we have a harder time with it. Men get used to it. Like you said, they're used to going up and getting rejected on dates. But when like a woman gets rejected, it's like so much, I think sometimes maybe harder for them to move on. Like they're a little bit more emotional, like I said, it's a general thing, what you were talking about. Not everyone's the same. I think men sometimes get lost in society too. They have issues and problems. They have to live up to this standard to like get a mate. You got to make money. You got to do all these things to attract someone. I think men sometimes get forgotten about in some of the struggles that they have to deal with on a day to day. They talk about, women imagery, like in modeling and all that stuff, and how we take it, it's like, oh, our bodies don't look like that. But men have the same thing too. They can look at men in the magazines with the six-pack abs and they're like, well, my body doesn't look like that. So sometimes I feel like men get a little lost in like their validation of their feelings and stuff. Just kind of off topic, talking about rejection and things like that. Hey friends, I hope you are enjoying this week's episode of Not Your Mama's Podcast. This podcast would not be possible if it wasn't for the support of you, my wonderful community. To support Your Mama's Podcast, please click the support link right down below and you can donate just as little as 99 cents. Also, follow me in the Shop Like to Know It app, where you can follow me with all my exclusive content, all the way from baby products I love, fashion and style, and everything in between. Now let's get back to the episode. So, does the myth of the alpha male ever apply to a woman?
Let's first talk about what the myth of the alpha male is.
Okay.
And this is a mistake people have about leadership. Many people look at leadership and think certain behaviors are behaviors of a leader. And if you want an example of this, just turn on some movie from the 1950s and look at what the leading man does. And that man, he is authoritative and bold, and don't you question him. And he's strong, doesn't show emotion because men aren't weak like that. And there are all these stereotypes of the alpha male. And unfortunately, we have ingrained in us, probably societally, possibly even culturally dating back further, we have these views that that is what we want in a leader. And when we see someone who's decisive, we think, okay, that's a good leader. Now, it's usually men who act this way. Don't show emotion and don't you even question me because I know what I'm doing. I'm authoritative. And we mistake that for leadership, whereas a good leader can say, hey, you bring up a good point. You know what? I have to think about that. I don't have an instant answer. A good leader might say, I'm hurt, might cry, might say, wow, this is horrible. And yet we don't usually think of that as an example of leadership traditionally. These norms are starting to change. So men tend to exhibit these behaviors because they tend to go with our view of that alpha masculine leading male. There are women who can convey that. There are women who can show those signs, and we can mistake it in women as well. Oh, she's a killer. She's, just all business and cold and ruthless, and that makes a good leader. Well, not necessarily a good leader in a man or woman to be ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
So don't mistake these particular attributes for true leadership. And in the book, I get into really what leadership is about and how to develop your style. So don't mistake characteristics like this, or really actions, for true values of a leader.
So what could someone do today listening? What are like 3 things someone can do to work towards better leadership, or better leadership for themselves, and or what they can do now to start a career plan?
For leadership, here's something simple you can do. Now, leadership, it's not one thing. Like, the most popular article I've written was entitled "Leadership is Not Atomic." There's no do this and you're a leader. It's almost like playing a sport. Say, okay, I'm going to play basketball. I'm going to be a good basketball player. Well, you have to get good at shooting and passing and rebounding and defense. There's a whole bunch of things you do, not one thing. So leading isn't do this one thing. And what you can do to start is think about people you admire who are leaders. They might be people you know, might be people you admire from afar, maybe a politician or some business leader. It could even be a fictional character. It doesn't matter. Look at these folks and say, these are leaders I admire.
Mhm.
Now, what is it I admire about them? What is the characteristic? What is it that they do or don't do? And this is going to help you begin your leadership journey. It's like saying, I really like this basketball player because he's a good rebounder. Okay, I want to be a good rebounder. So you've now identified the qualities that you want, and that's what you can start focusing on, building those qualities in you, and that will lead you to being a better leader.
That's great. And then steps to take to start their career plan.
For your career plan, on the website that we'll give you at the end, there are a number of free questions I give away. You can just download them and start by asking yourself these questions about where you want to go, where you want to wind up, what's important to you. And then you can backtrack from there. Just like you say, if this project has to be done on this date, well, where do we need to be 6 months before that? And how about 6 months before that? And you can backtrack out a plan. I go through that in a lot more detail, but the questions you can start with, and those are free on the website.
Perfect. Yeah. And I have all of Mark's links down in the show notes. So don't be shy, reach out, grab the book. I think it's an essential toolkit to figure out how to navigate your career. And I'm definitely going to take your advice on like the leadership stuff. I think that's amazing. I think it's a really good way to pick out people that you admire and write down what you admire about their leadership qualities. So do you have any last words before I go into my 4 go-to questions for all my guests?
When it comes to developing these skills, it's different than how we usually learn. If you want to learn accounting, you can just read a book, say, I've learned the accounting rules, done. That is knowledge transfer. When it comes to leadership, to negotiating, to communicating, there's no set of rules. There's no formula. There's no 3 steps that always work. These are best learned in peer groups. So what I'd recommend is get other people at your company, friends of yours. If you can't find anyone, create a local meetup group and find people and say, we're going to work on these skills together. And you can take some content. Now, yes, you can use my book, but you can use other books. You can use articles, use a great podcast like this one. And as you read some pages or hear an episode, discuss it with other people.
Mhm.
Talk about, hey, what did that mean to you about leadership? Or what skills are you working on for your leadership? Oh, I didn't think about that one, but yeah, that's a good one I should incorporate. Here's what I'm doing. Hey, I have a leadership challenge. Does anyone have advice who's been through this situation? This is how we learn. It's more like learning an instrument where you have to practice, you have to try, and you can do rehearsals, you can do group practice. So don't just read a book or listen to podcasts. Great way to start. And
Yeah.
obviously I'm a fan of both, but engage with other people. And that's really going to help you develop these skills.
Yeah, and it'll spark something in you and the creativity will start flowing. I think communication is so key to any aspect of your life, anything that you're doing. I think it's very important to have communication. Okay, Mark. So my first question to you is, who and what inspires you?
People of high integrity. And so right now, two people in the news, Zelensky, who said, I'm not backing down. I am staying here for my people, despite the high risk for me. Even Liz Cheney. Now, I very much disagree with her politics, but she said, this is not about politics. It's about doing the right thing. Even if this kills my political career, and the day that we're recording this, she's up for the primary reelection and will probably lose. But she chose to do what she believed was right, even if there was a high cost. So I really respect people with integrity.
Okay. And then my second question to you is, what is something you wished you knew when you were younger?
That these skills are so important. I did not realize how critical they were. I went to MIT, I focused on the academics, but these skills matter just as much, if not more. And the key thing is you don't have to be an expert. Getting just a little bit better at any of these skills will give you a huge return.
No, I agree. I mean, I went to college, I did well in school and when I was in college, and then they kind of just throw you out there. And I felt like there was so much that I was missing to land that better career. I felt like I really struggled a lot trying to find my place in the world and, to find the career. I feel like my major was marketing or public relations, and it's so broad that you can really do anything. I ended up doing event planning for a long time, but I think it's important to have these skills, especially for college students these days. When they go out, they're just kind of like thrown out there, and it's like, okay, now what do I do?
Exactly. And whether you are at a big company, a small company, or an entrepreneur, these skills will serve you well because they apply to so many of the things that we do in our day-to-day life.
I agree. So my third question is, what's the essential part of your daily routine?
I don't have one. I don't have any. I always do this. I always wake up. I just kind of do things as they feel right. Even my writing, I just wrote when the spirit moved me.
Yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard that I don't really do anything. I just wake up and go with my day. I love that answer. Because it's true. Sometimes you can't like plan your day. It is what it is. Things change. But one thing's for sure is that you woke up in the morning and you go to bed at night.
Yes. I didn't used to. I pulled plenty of all-nighters back in college, but these days I do try to get to sleep at some point.
Yeah. Okay. So my fourth question is, the best advice you've ever received?
It's a toss-up between two things. My mother always taught me nothing ventured, nothing gained. Take chances in life, calculated, reasonable chances, but take chances in life. The best business advice I ever got was Hanlon's razor. Never ascribe to malice that which can be explained by mere stupidity. So often something happens to us and we think, oh, you're a jerk. I can't believe you did that to me. Well, no, you weren't trying to be a jerk. In fact, you thought you were doing the right thing, but gets misinterpreted. And so going with the don't assume someone is out to get you at first will avoid a lot of conflict and fights at work and in life.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I love that. All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I felt like this was such a fruitful conversation. Do you have any last words before we say bye?
You can go to the website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. Not only can you learn about the book and read some of the articles I mentioned, the resources page has a number of free downloads, including how to create that peer learning group, the career questions we mentioned. This stuff is all free. I don't even ask for your email. Take it, use it, enjoy. There's also a free companion app to help you retain what you read in the book.
Awesome. All right, Mark. Well, thank you again for coming on to Not Your Mama's podcast. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Not Your Mama's podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.